Hi, thanks for joining us for That Larimer County Show. I'm Deni Larimer County Community Information Manager, and this is Neil Gluckman, Assistant County Manager at Larimer County.
Hey, Deni.
Hey,
Hey, we have a great show today. You know, I always say that, but today's show is going to be very interesting. We have two very special segments. The first segment is with our new County Commissioner, Lew Gaiter, and the second segment is featuring, well, it's how you would resolve getting laid off. We have someone from the Workforce Center who works with our clients, and as well, we have an author of a book on dealing with being unemployed and being laid off. Johnna Bavoso is the one that wrote the book. Dena Jardine, who is with our Workforce Center, they'll be joining us later.
And we'll hear about what they have in store. Okay.
So we're going to kick it off with our County Commissioner, right?
That's right. Larimer County Commissioner Lew Gaiter. And Commissioner Gaiter, you put your hat in the ring when Commissioner Kathy Reynolds resigned for another job.
Yes, I did.
And why did you do that? Why were you interested in being a county commissioner?
I've actually been interested in the executive branch of the government for quite some time, a number of years. And I actually considered running a few years ago. There was a potential thought that Commissioner Reynolds might resign a little earlier. But when she decided, and I actually was planning on running in November, when she decided to resign early, I was, okay, I guess I better move now. And it came pretty fast. I really enjoy serving the government and, well, serving people, period. The opportunity to give back to the county that's been pretty good to me over the years has been a fun opportunity, and I was excited about the opportunity.
Well, now you've been on the job several months. Do you have any particular insights, things you've learned, challenges, things that stand out for you?
You know, I think when you look at the government from outside, you wonder how well does it really work. You know, as candidates, we're all going to go in and change the world, and I tried to be real careful about saying that because I didn't know what I was going to run into, and I have to admit, things run better than I thought they did looking at it from the outside. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. There are some people who kind of duck when they see me coming, but now it's not that bad. But I really do like the people there. I think we've got a great group of people that work for Larimer County government. There's always room for improvement.
In your life, who has influenced you the most?
Who has been the biggest influence in my life? And you mean people living or just period?
Let's start with the living.
Okay.
Well,
no, it's fair. I mean, I've made no bones about my faith, but I think probably the biggest influence in my life has been my parents. My mom and my dad, they have really encouraged me to be very thoughtful, very open, consider both sides of an issue. It's we don't share the same political ideology, and yet we talk politics and philosophy and all kinds of stuff. One of the biggest things I remember my mom saying to me when I was a teenager, an older teenager, was, if you really believe something, you won't be opposed to differing points of view. They'll just help you develop that belief. And so I've found over my adult life that I really enjoy talking with people who actually disagree with me, and I learn a lot about what's going on. I try to listen open-minded, and I've changed my views in a lot of things. My core values really haven't changed much, but they've solidified because I've been asked some tough questions over my life, and I like to bring that attitude here when I look at something. I like to look at both sides of the issue, and I like to listen with an open heart and an open mind because I believe the truth will win out.
just to give a frame of reference, your parents are to the left or liberal.
My parents are Democrats. Yes,
Okay.
they are.
And
I'm a
more
Republican,
to the right.
and I'm much more conservative
So
than they are.
was there any one thing, or is it just life learnings, or that kind of shifted you as a young person to who you are now, to shift some of those? I think your core values are probably the same as your parents, right?
Yeah. My core values are real close to my parents.
The same, but something happened with your political.
You know, sometimes I would say the Democratic Party moved and I didn't move. I call myself a Ronald Reagan Republican. I voted for Jimmy Carter the first time. Or, I'm not sure I was old enough to vote for Jimmy Carter, but it was right in that time frame. And then Ronald Reagan the next time. I had a chance to just watch and listen, and I saw what Ronald Reagan did, and I realized that, you know, this actually fit more of where I was coming from. And I looked at some of the things that were happening in the Democratic Party, and they didn't fit my Christian values, they didn't fit my beliefs, and I started to be a little more concerned about some of the things. And I have some great Democrat friends out there, and my parents are Democrats, and we have some incredibly fantastic conversations.
Commissioner job is a really full-time job.
Yeah.
You have a lot of meetings, a lot of night meetings. You have citizen meetings all over the county, Red Feather Lakes, Wellington. I mean, you're getting out and about quite a bit. So how do you achieve a work-life balance?
My wife, every now and again, she says, well, boy, when do I get to see you again? So we try to get together for lunch, and I still get to take my kids to school some of the time, not as much as I was there for a little while. But I also have to admit, having had my own business, being a tech engineer and a top engineer before, in many ways, I used to work 60, 70 hours a week. So to some extent, it's a break only working 40 or 50 hours a week. It's still very much a full-time job. And I think the one thing that's hard is I'm still kind of trying to shuffle a few other things because this turned around pretty fast. So I've still got a few irons in the fire that I'm trying to get put away cleanly.
Something that could I ask in a different way. What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
I love to ski. I'm a volunteer ski patrol. I'm currently the first assistant director at the Loveland Basin Ski Patrol, or Loveland Skiers Volunteer Ski Patrol. And actually, in the third week of April, I will become the director. And that's for a year, but I'm really excited about it. It's been a 5-year commitment, and this is kind of the pinnacle of that. So
that's fun and work, because it is work.
It is, but this comes back to helping people. I have to tell you, I've helped people who've been pretty seriously hurt, and coming up to somebody who's in a lot of pain, laying on the side of the mountain, they don't know how they're going to get down, and being the first on scene, or showing up with a toboggan and giving them first aid, getting them in a toboggan off the mountain, and then seeing them into the ambulance. There's very few things that are that rewarding.
Okay. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges for Larimer County in your job?
Well, I think without giving too much away, I think some of the things for the county is obviously economic times. We have the jail taxes expiring in 2014. We have property assessment values are probably going to go down in the next year or so, and that could very easily create a major budget crunch for us. So we have to start thinking now about how we're going to address those things in the future. And one of the things, and as you two know, the citizens might not have, I'm already kind of on the stump about, let's see what we can do to tighten the belt now and do things better so that we run more efficiently now. Let's not assume we can go to the voters and get more money. Let's make sure that before we even think about going down that road, that we're doing everything as efficiently and as effectively as we can. Before I could even start to think about asking the citizens to come up with more money, I want to make sure that we're running as tight a ship as we reasonably can.
Your citizen meetings, you hold citizen meetings in Wellington and Red Feather Lake second Thursday of the month.
And I'm actually thinking about seeing if we can start one up in Fort Collins.
Oh, okay.
I'd love to see if we can get one down here. And I love having the ones in Wellington and Red Feather Lake. So for me, it's not about getting rid of any, but maybe even adding more. And one of the things that's kind of come up a couple times, I haven't even talked to Deni about this yet. She's like, oh, okay, is possibly a night meeting in Wellington, because there's some people who I've heard might be interested in a citizen meeting but have a hard time making a daytime one in Wellington.
And we should tell the folks that the reason we're talking about the North County is because that's the majority of Lou's district. And
I have the north half of Fort Collins all the way to the Colorado state line.
right.
Colorado-Wyoming state line, I guess. Pick one.
Well, as long as we're on that, even though Lou is elected at large by the entire county, you have to reside in a certain portion.
I
and
live
that's
just
District
outside
1,
the city limits of the north side of Fort Collins.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, and the citizen meetings are, I mean, those must be very interesting, getting you up to date really quickly on issues and things.
It's been fun. There are some very contentious issues going around in the county, but the people are phenomenal. It's great. It's a great place to live.
Great. Well, thanks for being on That Larimer County Show.
My pleasure.
Okay. And you can go to www.larimer.org, and we have a county calendar, and Commissioner Gaiter's citizen meetings are listed on that county calendar. And if we add one for Fort Collins, that'll be there too. So that's great. Okay.
Thank you.
And coming up, we have a segment with the Workforce Center on living after laid off.
It's a critical time right now. It's an emotional time for a lot of our viewers. And we're going to talk about a special partnership between Larimer County and the people business and how they work with these folks.
That's right. And here to talk about that are two very special guests. We have Dena Jardine, and Dena is the Associate Director of the Larimer County Workforce Center. Hi, Dena.
Hi, Deni.
And we have Johnna Bavoso. And Johnna is an author, which you'll hear about in a minute, an entrepreneur, and she has the people business. You wrote a book, Johnna, called From Laid Off to Living. And this is kind of the basis for this collaboration.
Yes.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well, Deni, it was early this summer when 14 of my good friends who I had also worked with, got laid off. And because we had had such a good relationship, they started coming and visiting, and we sat and talked. And my background is I have done a lot of change management consulting. And as we started talking about the changes they were going to go through, it became very emotional, because this is a very powerful experience that people go through, to lose their identity and their job and their whole way of taking care of themselves. So the more we talked, the more it seemed to me it might be good to bring that group together. So 10 of those folks met with me over the next 3 months in a support group. We met every other week for several hours, and we talked about their experience and basically kind of took them through a process that ultimately became the book. And as we went through that, they were able to then kind of deal with the roller coaster of the emotions they had and how to manage that more effectively. And by the time the group was completed, they felt really like, okay, this happened, I didn't want it to happen to me, but I can cope now, and I'm getting the energy I need to actually go out and look for employment and to be productive again. And that inspired me to then turn it into this workbook, which essentially is a guidebook. It has a little pencil, and it's designed for people to actually go through it themselves. And about the same time, I was introduced to the Workforce Center and Dena, and we started having a conversation about what it might be like to offer this to the folks at the Workforce Center.
I read something that you were quoted in it saying that if people didn't go through this emotional piece, that it was very hard to move on.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
kind of the basis of it for you?
That's been my experience in all kinds of change that I've helped folks through, particularly ones that are more traumatic like this. And that really, the belief and experience I have with folks is that our society tends to say to people, get over it. Especially in this kind of case, you know, just get on with life. When what's really happening is they've experienced a serious loss, like the death of a loved one or the death of a good friend. And this loss needs to have its time of healing. And that involves, for everybody I've ever worked with, a grieving process. They have to go through that initial part that says, this isn't happening, and pretend the denial, and then go through that really angry part that says, this is happening, and then the King's X bargaining that says, well, maybe if I contract back with the employer or do something, this isn't really happening, but it is. And then ultimately kind of open that sadness scrapbook and look at what they lost. And through that, slowly there's this kind of acceptance. And it doesn't mean, yeah, that should have happened, I mean, I'm better for it. That's not how it feels. It just is an acceptance that this happened to me. And once folks hit that acceptance zone, then they can start thinking a little bit about choosing in their life. Because we talk about the difference between chosen and not chosen change. And it's very important for all of us to have a perception of control. And laid off experience is no control.
Is there a danger of not going through that process? If I was laid off on a Wednesday and tried to get a job on a Thursday, is there an issue with that?
I think that there's folks who can do that, but my experience is what people do is they stuff those emotions to turn into some activity. They may get that job, but they may find a month, maybe even less later, they've got this kind of overwhelming feeling. It could be an anxiety feeling. It most often is loss and anger. And there they are in this new job, not having the energy that you would think you would have in a new job. So it's difficult for the person. The employers sometimes don't even let the folks get that far because they can tell in an interview there's some unfinished business. So I think what we're going to see as this time goes on, and we've heard this initially from some of our folks already, is that it kind of cleans that house that you have inside of what you've had to work through so that you can kind of approach that new place with more energy.
And does the book come with the pencil?
Yes, it does.
It does.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to
It
make
has
sure of
places to write in it and
Absolutely.
everything.
I just wanted to make sure that
Yep, it's here.
All
Slips
right.
right in there.
okay.
So Dena, tell us, how did the Workforce Center begin this collaboration with the people business?
Well, our staff who have been providing frontline services have been sharing for quite some time that the nature of the folks that they're seeing is different. And one of the characteristics is that the length of unemployment is significantly longer. And it's not that folks have never been laid off, but they have had the experience where they're laid off and within 2 months they're working again. And now what we're seeing is very qualified, very competent, very skilled individuals being unemployed 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It's a very different experience. And staff were saying we need to be doing something different because this is not being met through our traditional course of services. And when Johnna called and we met, it was just like, this is a perfect match because it provides a service that we're not currently offering. It meets a need that we believe is there. And we just said, let's see if we can make this work. And then we are almost through our first round of groups. We actually have 8 groups going right now. They'll be finishing up shortly. And our initial take is that it does meet a need. It is helpful and beneficial to our customers. And it just allows them to move to a different place and is supportive of them.
Now, is it typical counseling, or is it a workshop, or is it a combination of all that?
It's actually, it is not therapy. It is a very structured process, and Johnna has it written in the book, where our facilitators are trained, and they were trained by Johnna and certified to provide the service and the support groups. But it is a very structured process that takes individuals through the was, the is, and the will be, the anger cycle. And so the facilitators take the group of individuals and facilitate the process and allow them to engage in it. But it is a sequential activity, and we're currently running, they meet 6 times in about a 12-week time frame, and it allows them in between the meetings to think about what has been discussed, to process, to do their homework, to engage with their family and their friends around topics that maybe they haven't done before.
And I would think that the group, for the most part, is very emotionally, well, they're drained, they're sad. This is not an upbeat group ready to go rah, rah, rah.
I would say that that's probably true when they first come together on the first session. And it doesn't mean that they don't intermix all those feelings as they go through. But I think that there is such power and comfort in knowing that they're not alone, that there are other very skilled, competent people who are experiencing the same thing. And by the end of that first group, they've shared their stories and how the experience has affected them. And I think that there is great camaraderie that is built. And it's not like a cheerleading thing, but it is there are other people who are understanding my experience, and there are other people who understand where I've been and where I'm at. And the wisdom's oftentimes within the group. Absolutely. They can begin to help each other and network with each other. And many of the groups meet on the weeks that were not structured to meet. They build their own support system. And within that support system comes the wisdom and the comfort that they may not have had prior.
Most folks who've gotten laid off, there is an experience of being able to say it once or maybe twice, and then people really don't want to hear it. And it's just getting real for them. And so when they come to the group, the very first thing that happens after the sort of ground rules and confidentiality and howdy and who's here is people share their story. And when that happens, then they're able to, at whatever point they're either 3 months ago they got laid off or 3 weeks or in many cases over a year, they get to look at their story again as well. And because this group is of peers, they get that kind of real empathy that people need to have at that time. So the kind of stories that, some of the early stories in this, I've been observing the groups this last few weeks, so I'm still meeting folks and hearing stories. But I think maybe 2 kind of ends of the continuum. One would be a gentleman who was in a company for 20 years and had contributed what he believed to be a significant contribution for that whole time, and by the company was viewed as someone who was a big contributor and often was kind of the face of the company, not from the leadership position, but from a person that people would see in the community. And there had been some conversations in the company that there were some pending layoffs, and this gentleman was very concerned about everyone else. And even the day of the layoff was sort of looking, as people came out of various rooms knowing that was happening, looking to them to say, in his own way, how can I help? And the next thing he knew, he was in one of those rooms. And for him, it couldn't be more shocking. It couldn't be more shocking. And as the information was conveyed to him, he just kept saying, me? It was like he wanted to look over here and say, are you speaking to somebody else? That's how shocking it was for him. So his experience was this integrated life between himself and the company that was very close. His daughters had grown up through the years interacting with people in the company, going home and having his family outraged. And he couldn't initially experience that. He kind of partially was shocked, partially with denial, and partially he's a really positive guy. So it took him a while to realize what the impact was going to be. And so as he joined a support group and he told his story, obviously everyone else is very impacted, and it kind of helped him see his own picture a little better. Okay, so I think that's a very good example. There's also, it's a continuum. So there's folks who have been in positions for a very long time. There's also a number of folks who may be actually on their second or third layoff because of the industry they're in. They might be in a high-tech industry or a more volatile banking industry. And so they're kind of starting to feel that repercussion of, wow, you know, I can handle it maybe once, but boy, now I'm into another position. And then there are also several examples of what we might call the younger workforce, who perhaps never expected at this point in their life to have a lifetime job. You know, maybe they're into the 3 to 5 year cycle, but it happened to them. And their experience is slightly different because they may not be so shocked that it happened because they didn't maybe expect the long-term employment. But what they're dealing with is that they're very employable and not able to get employed. And now it's about dealing with that loss of the picture of what I thought my professional life would look like. I got all equipped, I got all prepared, I'm a professional. I should be able to go and, you know, I want to play on the team and nobody will put me in, coach. You know, nobody puts them in. And that's a very emotionally, that's the experience they're having after being laid off, because they're having to grapple with, is it going to be what I ever thought it was going to be?
So what do you do with that? I mean, with that example and other examples with a fairly high unemployment rate, the fear is for the future.
Yes.
The future says to me, it doesn't look good.
Yes.
How do you deal with that? Or what are the mechanisms that you provide to help someone deal with this future that doesn't seem all that
Rosy.
positive? Yeah.
Well, I have to say, one of the most important things about this model is we deal with reality. As you alluded to before, that means it's pretty emotional at times and it's pretty tough, especially when we get into the anger cycle. And that's a tool that we teach folks because that's a very common emotion. None of us really have learned how to handle it really very well. And so we teach a tool to express it, identify it, and deal with it. And part of the anger cycle is identifying your expectations, and are they real? Can you hold that expectation anymore? I often talk about, I don't go shopping at Target at 2 o'clock in the morning because it isn't open. And I know that because there's a sign that says I'm not open, you know. Well, that's kind of the same thing that goes on with folks. They need to really analyze and be clear about what should I expect. So for a lot of folks, that means, okay, no permanent employment anymore. It may mean that I can't stay in my particular career track at either the profession, industry, or the level. It may mean that I can't guarantee a long-term employment situation. So now people start doing what we do toward the end of the group. We start talking about, so what is your purpose in life? What are you doing here? What are your key principles? You know, who are the people you want to be with? And then we start talking a little bit about your passion. And what we're finding is folks can start moving then, and that attached to the activity of requesting or expecting people to volunteer. Volunteering is very powerful in this process because it moves them from inaction to action. When you volunteer, people appreciate you, and you get that feedback that you don't have when you're not working.
Hopefully.
Yeah, mostly. And so what happens is it's a process. That's why it takes some time, Neil, for folks to get there. But we don't sugarcoat it. And in the group, what's interesting is you'll have sometimes when people bring in the bad news, and they'll have read the latest wherever economic forecast, and then the group will sit there and they will share the 19 job leads they found this week. And they might not even be for them. So here's 3 for you, and here's 3 for you, and they start doing that. And in the last few weeks, what I've heard in the groups is there are more things to look at. Now, whether they fit you or not, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a balancing act between, and
Right.
people have to balance it
So
themselves
the first
inside.
thing we all have to learn is the world has changed.
Absolutely.
And then we have to
Absolutely.
change our personal paradigm as well to
Absolutely.
follow that.
And what this model really is a model for managing change. This loss happens to be being laid off. There's plenty of other changes that people are going to have.
And you ask a good question in the sense that the support group is not a job search group. There is no guarantee, there's no expectation that by going through the support group, someone will in fact become employed. That's not the purpose. What we do believe to be true is that by experiencing the support group environment, the energy that is tied up in the anger and the frustration and the sadness can be managed to be rechanneled to energy to engage with your family, your friends, your community, the workforce, employers. And it's that engagement piece that I think a lot of folks, particularly when they've been unemployed for a long time, that engagement is very difficult to maintain. And I think this allows them to process those experiences get back to that energy and re-engage.
And I imagine that this book was on your mind a long time before you wrote it. I mean, you've worked with the principals, it sounds like, for a while. And so this is the first time that this program, this collaboration has occurred, right? So are you learning, are you surprised by some of the things that are going on in the classes with people? In other words, are you finding that there's a sequel?
Well, that's a two-part question. So the first part of the question is not so much surprised but pleased that people create a pretty quick bond with each other. And that's pretty cool because people are isolated when they're unemployed, especially when they've been laid off. So they're coming together, and what we see, and it's pretty cool to see how people bond together and create these ongoing communications. In fact, today we just had a group of folks who graduated. We're planning kind of an alumni picnic for folks who all graduated from this program. It'll be in mid-May, and they want to kind of celebrate that they came through this with peers that would understand what it took to go through it. And I think the other thing that maybe is not surprising, but we're probably going to start addressing, is the impact on spouses. Right. And we're looking at maybe offering spouses something, because that's a tough it's a tough road to hoe between the partners. I think the other thing that Neil referenced before is that it starts out hard and heavy, but by the time folks get to the end of the group, there's a sort of exuberance almost that says, wow, look what we did, because it's demanding to go through this emotionally, and there's homework, and you got to show up, and you got to work with your peers here.
And they change. You change as you go through this.
You change, absolutely. And so you come out saying, look what I did. I've got muscles. And particularly I talked to a lady today who's about halfway through, and she let go of the blame, and now she's into, it's time for me to take some action. And that's what you're talking about. That's very significant. Now, the second part of the question, unless you want to respond to that.
Oh, no, she's got a sequel. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But do you want to talk about the...
We have about a minute or two
No,
left, so
okay.
we will
Okay,
move
so
on.
briefly, in general, what my experience is that people are not very well respected when they're laid off. And so the sequel is about respect. It's collecting examples of respectful layoffs. But maybe more importantly, and I think this is going to be the message, is we're done with pretending. When you hire me, you need to say, it's possible that you'll be laid off. Let's not pretend. And so let's talk about the principles under which I'm going to operate as your employer, and here's the practices I'm going to implement when that happens. So you may exit on your own, or I may ask you to exit, but either way, we're going to be grown-ups about it now, and we're going to come to understanding about what that looks like. That's my hope, is to start that shift, because that is a big change.
The folks that are, let's say, between 20 and 30, do they take this easier than the ones that are 30 and above, or is there no difference in ages?
I don't think anyone takes it easier. I think how it affects them is different, but I think it is viewed as a personal experience when you are the person who is selected to leave, and I don't think age necessarily makes it easier.
And Dena, tell me, how can people get more information about this free program?
They can go to our website, which is www.larimerworkforce.org, and go to the workshop section of the website, and there's more information there.
Well, thank you, Dena.
You're welcome, Neil.
And thank you, Johnna. And I think it's been a very interesting show, Deni.
Yes, it has been fun, and thank you for joining us for That Larimer County Show.